What is up, everybody? Sean Sheehan back here with another edition of the Sheehan Show for Sherdog.com, and I want to talk about my weekend in the world of mixed martial arts. Obviously, Bellator returned to Ireland, and I was there for the whole week covering it, as everyone saw, I'm sure, on Sherdog.com. I had a couple of interviews with Leah, McCourt, and Sinead, Kavanagh. I did a betting job, which didn't go great. I'm not gonna lie, wasn't the best. But we'll talk about that in this week's edition of the betting show, and the preview for the card as well. So I was up there as well covering it for Severe MMA, talking about the card, and obviously it was there was a lot of news emerged from it, from the Bellator fights themselves and from outside of it as well. And I've kind of three takeaways from the card, and three things I want to come on here and talk about. I mentioned Leah McCourt and Sinead Kavanagh. I'm going to talk about that. That's the third thing. I want to talk about a couple of new contenders that have emerged in Irish MMA you need to keep an eye on. That's the second thing I'll talk about. But the first thing I want to talk about here is Conor McGregor. Obviously, I know a lot of people have probably seen it by now. I talked to Conor McGregor backstage at Bellator this week. I interviewed him and I asked him a couple of things. And I suppose I jump on here to kind of talk about it a little bit and talk about him and where he goes next. I did a show at the turn of the year around Christmas time talking about what I think should be next for Conor McGregor and where I think he should go. And my opinion on that was a Tony Ferguson fight made a lot of sense. I think, they're at probably the same kind of ebb at the moment in terms of where they are in the division. With obviously McGregor being the biggest star in the history of the sport and a massive money fighter. So he's obviously going to be elevated a little bit further. But in terms of the sport itself, in terms of a matchup, I think a lot of people would probably agree that matchup would make a lot of sense. Tony Ferguson, if he was smart, I think he would be looking for that. But he seems to be looking for Michael Chandler and other things. McGregor really hasn't mentioned him. Many people haven't mentioned that fight. And then when I spoke to McGregor, he was talking about fighting for the title. I asked him what weight class would he fight at, and he kind of said, I don't know, maybe 170, 155. And then he just kind of went after the 155 title in his next answer. He was, he was saying, is the Gaethje versus Oliveira fight happening? If it's not, could he get in there? He's getting back to training very soon, and what his next step is going to be. And I thought, McGregor, when he came back initially against Cowboy it seems like a lifetime ago, but he was talking about that season, getting 3 fights in, getting back to where he hadn't been in a long time, and that's an active MMA fighter. McGregor had 4 fights in 11 months when he, culminating in the Eddie Alvarez fight, after the 2 Nate Diaz fights, and the Jose Aldo fight to win the 145-pound belt. All of those 4 fights, so the featherweight, the 2 Nate fights, and the lightweight title fight, were all in 11 months. McGregor had the whole stay ready so you don't have to get ready thing. And it felt like he wanted that again back in 2020, but then the coronavirus hit. Obviously now he's broken his leg again, and I kind of asked him, he's always a guy who's tried to move on and move up and do different things, and that broken leg or broken ankle or whatever it is, the bad injury has kind of stopped him again from doing that after the pandemic stopped him, after the Mayweather thing stopped him. So it feels like it's a very frustrating time. Like, you can leave everything else aside. We talk about the getting out of the silk duvet in the morning and everything like that being tough, but it must be tough mentally and physically as well to kind of go through that. And he's obviously emerged from a lot of money, so I don't have too much sympathy for him. But you know what I mean? To want to be the top fighter, I asked him straight out, like, do you kind of have regrets for missing part of your prime, and do you think do you have something to prove? And he kind of said yes, but no at the same time, which is a fair enough answer from someone who's achieved what he has. But there's definitely a bit of regret. As someone who is one of the most intelligent people we've ever seen in the sport, in terms of the sport itself and knowing what the sport is, he knows that he doesn't have the legacy he should have, because of who he is, first of all, but also some of the decisions he's made, especially the Floyd Mayweather one, by going away to have that boxing match, because that boxing match stopped him from having more big MMA fights, which, if he would have won them, which he looked at the time like he wasn't losing many fights, would have elevated him to another level. So I think it's very interesting now that he is looking straight to a title fight, because if you want to get back to that, if you want to elevate your standing in the MMA community, or in as an MMA fighter, not the MMA community, he doesn't care about people, but he cares about his reputation and his legacy. if you were to fight maybe an easier fight now, and maybe 2 easier fights. Now, and when I'm saying easy, Tony Ferguson's not an easy fight, or going in there maybe against a Beneil Dariush or something like that is not an easy fight. But taking a couple of fights like that, maybe having a little bit, less money. Look at, we can argue if the UFC will allow him to do that, and they probably won't. They won't want him to do that anyway. And he's talked before, we've seen those DMs with Dana White stopping him from being active, right? But let's say he did that. Then that title fight, if he was to win those 2 fights, I think everyone would be roaring and raging for a McGregor title fight then. And if he was to win that, then that's what brings him back to being what he sees in himself and what many of his fans want him to be. So I think that would be the way to do it, and that would be the way to elevate yourself even more. Like, McGregor has done so much in his career, he doesn't need to do it. But if he wants to do it, that's the way I think he could do it or should do it. But he seems to want to get straight back in there at the very, very top, which is a very interesting move, because that's not the way he wanted to do it 2 years ago. But maybe he's thinking, oh, like, that didn't work 2 years ago, I need to try something different. It's an interesting one. It's a very interesting one, because look, we have we've spoken about McGregor being outside of the cage, not being active, not having lots of fights, being away from and having other things. But there's that now, but there's also the injury. Coming back from that injury is not easy. It's a very, very tough one. As he said himself in the interview with me, it's not, that injury mightn't have healed. Something happened with Chris Weidman. There was an issue, and I think he had to get surgery again. So this is a very serious injury, a very serious thing to come back from. So to come back from that alone, forget about the inactivity and getting away from MMA for years before that. Coming back from that alone is very tough, and coming back in a title fight is very, very tough. So it's interesting to see, look, what he says, what he wants, and what actually happens. So I'm very interested to see what happens over the next while, and that's on that part of it, I suppose. The other side of the McGregor thing, having talking to him, he seemed in really good spirits. He was obviously at the event. He came in, just missed the first fight, Leah Hammond, and we'll talk about Leah in a second, but he was there for almost all of the rest of the night. He kind of was going in and out. He was taking pictures. I haven't seen McGregor like that in a long time. Obviously, there's been a lot of Bellator events and different things that I've been at in Ireland, and he's kind of come in for one fight, he's left, he come in for another fight. There was obviously the incidents with the whole Charlie Ward thing, with Mark Goddard and all. There was none of that, no messing. It was all very much for the fans, very much support of his team. He didn't, at one stage, I think in the Sinead fight, he kind of walked over to the cage and was roaring instructions at her, but there really wasn't even much of that throughout the fight. Okay, he was standing away from the cage roaring instructions, like all teammates would be. I saw, Paul Redmond even doing it, and Kiefer Crosby, and all different people. That's natural. You're going to get that at any MMA event. But he didn't seem to make it about him and the event. He seemed cordial, and when I was speaking to him briefly before and after and during the interview, he seemed in good spirits. And I think the reaction mostly to my interview with him was, this is kind of the old McGregor talking. I do think, in fairness, and it's not just me, he's talked to Andrew McGann and other people in the past, when he does kind of speak to Irish people and people he's known for a long time, and I don't know him that well, but he's, obviously I've known him as a fighter, and he's known me covering the sport for a very, very long time. Someone he's maybe a bit more comfortable with. Obviously, Graham, who I do the podcast with over in Severe MMA, has produced his documentary, and also he's, he knows Severe MMA very well. He's comfortable with Severe MMA, where I did the interview. He's going to be a little bit more comfortable. Also, I think, when you're speaking to someone from your own country, you can speak in your normal accent. You don't have to, and this is not just McGregor, this is a lot of people. You play down the accent maybe a little bit so they can understand you, and it's going to be a little bit easier and stuff. Where with me, he doesn't, he kind of knows he doesn't have to do that. So I think it seemed more natural, and it seemed, he sounded better because of it, and that's for other people to judge. But that seems to be what people are saying. So, all in all, it's great. Look, if this was Conor McGregor or anyone else, I'd be saying the same thing. After someone had that bad of an injury, it's great to see him back. It's great to see him in good spirits. It's great to see him talking about, in a few weeks, I will be sparring. And what is it, like 5 weeks away? I think he said that he's going to be back, and he's going to be able to do, everything. And he's back pretty shortly. Before that, even doing bits and pieces, I think. So that is the update on Conor McGregor from when I spoke to him. And overall, I think, if you're a McGregor fan, obviously it's very, very positive. Or if you're a fan of the sport, even want to see one of the biggest stars in the sport back, it looks like, a lot of people said to me, I remember I woke up the next morning after McGregor broke his leg against Poirier, to a few of my friends, and they said, McGregor will never fight again, will he? And my first thought was absolutely he'll fight. He will not go out like this. But a lot of people did think that he'd never fight again. After talking to him on Friday night, I don't think there's any hope that Conor McGregor will never fight again. He will be back. He seems to be raring to go. And I think we can expect Conor McGregor back in maybe the late summer, maybe the autumn time this year. But definitely we can expect Conor McGregor to fight in 2022. And if you haven't seen that interview, please check it out. Appreciate all the support as well after it. I know there's a bit of criticism, a bit of giving out, but I think most of it was very positive, and it was great to see the support from the MMA community and wider as well. And I'm glad to bring everyone an update on Conor McGregor, and thanks to Conor for his time as well. A couple of Conor's teammates on the second part of this I want to talk about is the next batch of Irish MMA fighters coming through, and it was a very interesting night in Irish MMA because we'll talk about Leah and Sinead in a second, but the two of them are ranked fighters, so you wouldn't say they're the next batch, the next young up and coming fighters coming through. You would Brian Moore the same. He's been training nearly as long as Conor McGregor, if not longer. He has been there for years and years. He should be ranked, I think, at the moment, but he's on the verge of being ranked. He fought, I think Lugo's ranked number 9 or 10 maybe, so he's fighting someone who's basically in the rankings. And right up there. But I want to talk about the guys who are just making their start, and namely Darragh Kelly and Leah Hammond. I was speaking to someone. I mentioned this on one of the other places I was talking as well. I was talking to someone at the press day, or the weigh-in, sorry, and they were kind of saying to me that this new level of young Irish MMA fighters coming up is a little bit different to the last batch we had. Now, the last batch we had was, I would say, it was people would know James Gallagher, Kiefer Crosby, and a few more like that. Maybe even Ciaran Cowley, who is 5 or 6 fights into his career and everything like that. And a lot of those guys were kind of Team McGregor, if you want to put it like that. And every time they did an interview with someone maybe from outside of Ireland or whatever, or every time they had a fight, it was, this is Conor McGregor's teammate. This is, he's under the tutelage of John Kavanagh. And then they do an interview and the fans would be like, oh, he's trying to be McGregor. He sounds like McGregor. It was McGregor, everything. And they tried... in some ways you try to play it up, in other ways you try to kind of play it down, but you have to be respectful of your teammate. And I remember James Gallagher was asked about it, and he goes, look, if you're comparing me to Conor McGregor, you're comparing me to one of the greatest fighters of all time, so is this a slight on me or a compliment kind of thing? And that, I suppose, is the right answer, but still the question was being asked, right? And there was no divide between kind of McGregor and them. And when you are comparing anyone to Conor McGregor in MMA, especially in Irish MMA, that's very, very unfair, because he's a double champion and the most famous fighter in the history of the sport. How can you live up to that? You can't live up to that. And that brings a pressure to the fighters, but it also brings kind of an unfair... reputation is the wrong word, but it brings just an unfair kind of talk from the fans. Because all the fans are kind of talking about, like, oh, you're a McGregor wannabe, you're never going to be him. Whereas, like, those lads are good fighters. They mightn't be champion level at the moment, or mightn't be McGregor level, but they're good. Like, James Gallagher's ranked in the Bellator, in the Bellator tournament. He's going to the tournament ranked number 6 or 7, and I think deserves to be right up there. Maybe you'd have him a couple of spots lower or whatever, but if a good fighter, maybe you don't think he's the best fighter in the world, but no, there's no doubt about it. James Gallagher's a good fighter, same for Kiefer, same for other guys as well. But they always had that with him. The next level of guys, I feel like, are a little bit apart from that. Even Leah Hammond, who has trained with McGregor for a long time and everything like that, and Darragh Kelly was another guy. Now, we had other people as well fighting, obviously, unfortunately Danny McCormick lost, but we had Nathan Kelly fighting as well, and we've had a few guys on the past cards as well fighting. But the two really stand out for me were Leah Hammond and Darragh Kelly in this card. And I didn't listen to the broadcast, obviously, because I was there, but in the media there was no question about Conor McGregor, right? Not one. There was none afterwards. I would kind of garner on the broadcast. They may have said about Leah Hammond, because he was a very close training partner of McGregor, but I don't think anyone was kind of saying, oh, he's the next Conor McGregor, or with Darragh Kelly, he's close friends with Conor McGregor. It feels like they have that divide from McGregor, which, isn't necessarily a good thing in terms of training or becoming the best, or even your popularity, but it takes an extra little bit of pressure off those guys, I think, so they can concentrate just on their MMA, just on getting their fights in, and just becoming very, very good fighters. Whereas the other guys, they had that little bit of pressure. They had that bit of, I'd almost call it negative hype maybe, you know, whereas these new batch don't have it. And I think it's actually benefiting them because these guys look like they went out and they fought without pressure. And they also have the benefit of, you know, McGregor obviously coming in, getting a lot of money for himself and John Kavanagh and SBG Gym, and now they were able to build a new gym and these massive facilities, and these guys who have been training there at these great facilities since McGregor's taken over now have 5-6 years of those amazing facilities, and it's starting to show. And it's really, really great for these new batch. And this next batch coming through, we had the Irish Amateur Championships, the first ever Irish Amateur Championships a couple of weeks ago, and there's some very, very good talent in that. Now, I've a bit of a problem with the amateur structure the way it is, but that's maybe a podcast for another day. I don't like the 3 rounds for MMA. I don't think it makes sense. I'd rather 1 5-minute round than the 3 3-minute rounds, but that doesn't matter now. But Leah Hammond and Darragh Kelly look really good. Leah Hammond, first of all, if people don't know Lee, right, so he was Conor McGregor's kind of main jiu-jitsu training partner, or if not the main one of them anyway. My good friend Andrew McGahan, I'll mention him again, he's a very good jiu-jitsu player on the Irish scene and beyond as well. He always talked about Liam and how good Lee is, and any jiu-jitsu player around Ireland and the UK and Europe, if you ask them about Lee Hammond, I guarantee you they'll tell you how good of a jiu-jitsu player he is. Lee made his second appearance on Friday night in the cage. The first was at a smaller show. This is his first appearance in Bellator, and he won by knockout on both occasions. In his first fight, he came out and he was sliding around the ring, or the cage, like someone who has been kickboxing for 10 years. This is a jiu-jitsu guy now. And he comes around and he's so good. Looks so smooth on the feet. Looks really good at all aspects of the game. Then he comes out against Jamie Hay, who just comes like kind of straight for him, tries to put it on him, tries to make it tough. He hits him with a beautiful knee after a few strikes. Then Hay goes to the ground, tries to grapple with him, and I think anyone who knows Lee Hammond is sitting there like, well, that's probably not the best idea, and he just eats him up and ends up finishing him. This guy, if you're looking for a prospect coming out of Ireland, who, you know, we have the Ian Garrys, obviously, we have the Paul Hugheses and Joe McColgans and other people who've been doing it for maybe a little bit longer, or, you know, for Joe obviously a good while, but you know, around the 10 fights ish mark for the other guys I mentioned there. This guy's only 2 fights in. This was his second fight on Friday night. This is a guy you need to keep an eye on. This guy has the skill set to be as good as anyone Irish MMA has ever produced apart from Conor McGregor. You know, he has that skill set. Now, will he be that? And you could say that for him, Darragh, and anyone. You could pick out anyone. Will they be that? We don't know. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of luck. You know, we talk about McGregor, even with injuries and different things like that. It takes a lot of that, but he has that skill set, and he is a guy you absolutely need to keep an eye on. The other guy I want you to keep an eye on from this card is Darragh Kelly. This guy, I've never seen someone. It's not since I saw Cathal Pendred on the Lewis one time going into an event, and he was fighting up away at that stage. Have I seen someone as stocky is the word we use in Ireland? I don't know if you'd use that. Let me know in the comment section in America or anywhere else. The build on this guy, he's an athlete. He's so strong and it's pure muscle, pure lean, and he can go as well. He has good cardio. He's fast. He is an animal. I think it's, correct me wrong, I think it's 155 pounds he's fighting at. And this guy, he just, watching a few of his fights, he won our, over in Severe May, he won our Amateur Fighter of the Year for 2020. So we've known about him for a good while and known that he's very good. Going back and watching some of his amateur fights before this, this guy is an absolute animal. And now, I'm very, very interested to see his career progress and see when he meets someone as athletic as him or as fast as him or as strong as him, how he deals with it. Because it's sometimes you can't see the skill set of a fighter because that athleticism kind of takes over at this level. And not to say that he doesn't have very good skills. I would, from what I've seen so far, I think he does. But it's almost as if you're so strong and so athletic you don't even need those skills to beat some people. And I'd be very interested to see his next few matches, because I think, like Ciaran Clarke as well, he's another guy I have to mention, but he's kind of a few fights ahead of these guys as well. A really, really, really good prospect. He is a guy who his toughness is almost outdoing his skills. And I think Darragh Kelly at the moment is that guy. I want to see him match made like Ciaran Clarke is being match made, getting tough fights, hard fights, and fights every few months to keep him going, to keep him pushing, to keep taking him to the next level, and that's Darragh Kelly. Ciaran Clarke as well, I have to mention him. Obviously this fight against Tunkara ended because of looked like a dislocated shoulder, so a tough, you know, it was an interesting open round. Tunkara had some very, very good moments, and Clarke was kind of coming back, but Clarke is a lot of times a second and third round fighter as well, and he will beat you there, but he's very, very good as well, and I have to mention him, and maybe I'll put that rematch together, but yeah, the next level of Irish MMA fighters looks very, very good, and I'm looking forward, and I can't wait to see all three of those guys, Ciaran Clarke, Lee Hammond and Darragh Kelly, all get their next outings. Actually, Lee Hammond is fighting in a few weeks on a smaller card. I think is it Heroes or Levels? I always mix them up for some reason, but yeah, he's fighting in like 3 weeks time anyway, and he's going to be staying active, so it's great. It's going to be great to see him. And we'll talk now a little bit about Leah McCourt versus Sinead Kavanagh, but I want to give a shout out. I mentioned Nanny McCormick already. She took a tough loss, but she'll be back, a very good fighter. And Brian Moore as well, I briefly mentioned him earlier. This guy is one of the best fighters in Ireland at the moment. I think himself, Pedro Carvalho, Peter Queally have really taken steps forward over the last couple of years, and those guys were kind of the in-between guys as well, between the current batch of maybe even between the McGregor, Pindred, Daly kind of batch and the batch of Kiefer and James. And I think those guys have had very, very tough matchups and a very tough time and fought all over the world against tough opponents. And Brian Moore especially, I would love to see him get a big win. It was very unfortunate, very unlucky, maybe not to get the decision a close one. I'm not saying it was a robbery, don't get me wrong now. But you'd love to see him get a big win and on a big stage like that against a big opponent. And I think he will, because his skills are very, very good. And Jarnell Lugo is a very, very good fighter as well. But I have to mention Sinead Kavanagh against Leah McCourt. And this was one of these fights, right, that if you're watching, I actually saw a tweet from Rebecca Hitman, so I might be wrong on what I'm about to say, but Rebecca Hitman said it was a mad fight, a crazy fight. I watching it live, thinking about people watching at home, I was thinking maybe they don't think it's the best fight in the world, or maybe they don't get what's happening here. But I think they might have. So I'll tell you what in a second here, what my thoughts of it were. First of all, the atmosphere just in general throughout the whole night, it didn't feel as special as other nights. Like the Queally fight not happening, and the zombie walkout not being there, and an Irish person not being in the main event. Sweet Caroline is not the same as Zombie, and it might have sounded great on TV. Live it sounded very good, but anyone who's been in that arena for those big walkouts before would agree it didn't sound anywhere like the manic sound that we had before. It was still very good, don't get me wrong. The fans were fantastic throughout the night, but it was a night where there was lots of lulls. There was too many fights that people didn't care about, and just the fan base wasn't the same as it was. I know Scott Coker was there. I think it was his first time there, and I'll tell you what, if Scott Coker comes back again and sees maybe Sinead Kavanagh versus Cyborg in the main event, or a James Gallagher main event or something like that, he will be truly blown away then. But that's I suppose that's a point for another time. But the point on the Sinead Kavanagh Leah McCourt fight was the tension in there was unlike anything I've maybe ever seen. I think the McGregor-Brandao fight, okay, that was on a different level, and you can take away that card out of it. The tension in there for that was unreal. The tension in there for Carl Pendred's comeback against Mike King that night was unreal. But for the whole fight, the tense nature of this, the aura around the fight was so weird, because you've Leah McCourt, who obviously has been, down, living above in Belfast, being part of the Irish MMA scene. She used to train out of Owen Roddy's gym, which is kind of, I suppose you call it a sister gym of SPG Ireland. He is used to be Primal Martial Arts, and now SPG Charlestown. You know, he's one of Conor McGregor's main training partners through the years, and coach now as well with John Kavanagh and Sergei Pekulski and others as well. So Irish MMA has followed Leah McCourt. Conor McGregor has followed Leah McCourt. Everyone has wanted Leah McCourt kind of to win down through the years. But now she's fighting Sinead Kavanagh, who everyone wants to win as well, and who everyone has been supporting. It's weird, because it's a massive fight, but the fans are like, who should I want to win? Who should I don't want anyone to lose. Like, Sinead Kavanagh gets Leah McCourt in a Kimura, and it looks like she's going to kind of dislocate her shoulder or break her arm or whatever it might be. The fans are there. It's like, okay, do we want Sinead to win? We kind of do, right? But do we want Leah to get injured? No, we don't. It was such a weird situation, because everyone is there and they're like, we don't really, we want someone to win, but maybe we don't want them to win in this fashion with a gruesome injury. And it was just so, It was so weird, but so brilliant at the same time. You would cut the tension in there with a knife. I've never ever experienced anything like it in sport. You know, I suppose it might have been something like if the Williams sisters played in tennis, and now obviously in at a different level of skill and everything like that. But in Irish MMA, this was absolutely massive. This was massive. And I don't know if people get that from outside of Ireland. And I'm not sure that's possible anywhere else in the world apart from Ireland, to be honest. Because we have such a small, tight-knit community. And, you know, I saw it even throughout the week. The amount of fighters I spoke to. And, you know, they were very complimentary of me in the shows. And you know, our different websites and everything like that. And complimentary of each other as well. It's a very, very friendly, tight-knit community. And when two people are kind of put together... It was weird. It was brilliant, but very, very weird. And you know, the fight the way it went, where Leah got in mountain at the very start, and people were cheering her, right? The whole crowd were cheering her. Then Sinead almost submits her, and the whole crowd are cheering her. And then Sinead gets hurt, and they're like, "Oh no, what's?" and then Leah almost, you know, maybe could have got the finish. And then Sinead kind of came back in it, and everyone cheered Sinead in the end. And I thought there was obviously no one booing Leah or anything like that, but I think people felt bad for Leah at the end as well. It was crazy. It was insane. And, you know, it mightn't have, as I said, it mightn't have seemed mad or important to people outside of our Irish MMA or people watching at home. But to the people in that arena and the people who care about Irish MMA, it was one of the most important fights we've ever seen. And that might sound like hyperbole, but it isn't really. It isn't. It was weird. You know, we've had Paul Redmond versus Norman Park before, and that was similar, but not the same, because it didn't have the level of jeopardy, I suppose is the word my good friend Graham McDonald uses, because, you know, Sinead Kavanagh got a title shot after winning this, allegedly. Kind of Scott Coker took it back a little bit, but, you know, and I think Leah probably would have got a title shot as well. Maybe, you know, maybe it's a little bit of a blessing in disguise too for Leah, I think, because I think she needs a few more. This will stand her as well. Make no mistake about it. I said it over in the Severe MMA podcast. I don't think this is the last time they'll fight, honestly. And imagine, another point is, like, imagine if Cyborg kind of, if she retired, right, or went to PFL or went back to the UFC or something like that, and sometimes the division might be better because of that. Now, if Cyborg went away, obviously, but you know what I mean. Now, like, John Jones goes away, and he's a great, but the light heavyweight division has been fantastic since he's gone away. Like, I can't wait for this fight between Glover and Prochazka. Like, the Glover win was fantastic. The Blachowicz win was fantastic. It's been great, and I feel like that might be the same for that division. Now, you know, people will drag that argument apart and call me stupid for that. And fair enough, in ways it absolutely is. I agree with that. But if it led to a Sinead Kavanagh versus Leah McCourt title fight in Ireland, that would be insane. And even if that doesn't happen, I think they'll fight again down the road, and I think it'll be massive again. And you know, I for one, I can't wait for that. So, you know, all in all, a big weekend for Irish MMA. You know, we had Mousasi in the main event, beating Austin Vanderford after, I think it was a bit of an injury, or, you know, he finished him well anyway, though. So great stuff there, and it's great to see Gegard there as well. But, you know, those are my kind of big takeaways from it. McGregor sounding good, looking good, getting back to health. The new batch of Irish MMA emerging, and this massive fight between Leah McCourt and Sinead Kavanagh, like something I suppose we have never seen before. So I will leave it at that. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks all the support during the week. If you haven't hit subscribe here yet on Sherdog.com, whether you're listening to it in audio or video, please click that subscribe button. Please give this a thumbs up and a like. And tell your friends about it as well, because the more people that listen, the more people that will listen in the end as well. So I will leave it at that. My name is Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.